Welcome to the second annual FilmDayton Awards. My name is Nicole Richter and I'm on the Board of Trustees for FilmDayton, and I'm also the head of the awards committee for the FilmDayton Awards. This is our second annual award ceremony, and we are honored to recognize the amazing filmmaking talent that we have right here in Dayton, and that's the point of the awards, is to celebrate the strength of our regional film community. I'm going to begin with some thank yous. First, I want to thank our sponsors. The title sponsor for the festival is the Jack W. and Sally D. Eichelberger Foundation through the Dayton Foundation, and the festival this year would not have been possible without their support. We also have annual support from our friends at Sochi, Right State, and Think TV. We have festival media sponsors of the Dayton City Paper, WYSO, Classical WDPR, and Dayton Most Metro. I would also like to thank all the volunteers that work countless hours putting together the festival, and really without them, the festival wouldn't be possible. So please give them a round of applause. We're really proud to have our awards created and designed by a local artist. Her name is Susan Cannon, and she made these beautiful awards right here. So I'd also like to thank her. So we're doing something new this year at the FilmDayton Festival. This is the first year that we were a submission-based festival. And part of that was that we wanted to honor some of the filmmakers that submitted their shorts to the festival. And so we're going to begin the ceremony with some Audience Choice Awards from our various shorts blocks during the festival. This year, members of the audience got to participate in the award ceremony by voting for their favorite award at the end of the festival. Most of these filmmakers are not here, but if you are here and I call your name, please come up to receive your award. For Flick My Clip, Street Cred by Zach Sherwin won. For Friday Night Fright, Cold Turkey by Fanner Arneson won. And he's from Iceland, so I'm guessing he's not here. For Shorts Block 1, Till Death by Jason Tostevin. Is he here? Ohio filmmaker, congratulations. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah. And for Shorts Block 2, Nothing Lost by Ketty Vitonis won the award. Tonight we will be giving out 3 major awards. The first award will be the Filmmaker Award, which is to honor career excellence in filmmaking. The second award will be the Key Award, which is to honor special service to the filmmaking community. And the third award is the Innovation Award, to honor creative achievement of innovation in filmmaking. This year, we invited members of the community to nominate filmmakers they thought deserved an award. And if you think somebody should be up here, then please consider nominating next year as we approach the festival, because we are an open nomination award ceremony. Another special part of this ceremony will be the videos that were made about each filmmaker, and I want to recognize the 3 makers of those videos: Pete Wine, Henrik Kuto, and the Trinity Film Group, Greg Kennedy and Anthony Chambers. They put in countless hours in these videos, and I want to show support for them now. So we will begin with the presentation of our first major award, the Filmmaker Award for Career Achievement of Excellence in Filmmaking. This award is given in memoriam this year to Andy Copp. I invite up Henrik Kuto, a filmmaker and close friend of Andy's, who will be presenting the award.
Thank you. I was 24 years old, crouched down in the dirt in the middle of the night holding a camera. I had 3 feature films under my belt at that point, and I felt like nothing could faze me. The work I made wasn't anything like what I was doing that night. Everything I had done was so commercial in comparison. It was a hot night and we were running a generator to our lights and swatting away mosquitoes, and that day, part of my director of photography duties were not just getting shots in focus, but also digging a 4-foot hole in the ground. It was a grueling day, but I pushed through because his vision had to come to life, regardless of the weather or inconveniences of a low budget. Andy's work was out there on its own, and in that particular scene, he was completely naked and covered in blood. I love to quote Allen Ginsberg, "The poet always stands naked before the world. If the true poet stands naked before the world, then the true independent filmmaker stands naked in a field in rural Indiana." And he made films that mattered. The audiences may have been small, but they were never as small as he was concerned. When he was feeling insecure, Andy would often confide in me that he felt no matter what he did, it would be torn down by audiences and by fans, and by critics. Andy's work was often misunderstood or met with dismissive attitudes from people who weren't prepared for it. The majority of his work was so visceral, the only way to describe it would be upsetting. And it takes a certain level of emotional maturity to be able to appreciate a work of art that basically assaults you. At his worst, he was afraid that his art would never be understood and that he would be an obscure footnote. At his best, he was a visionary with a mind's eye like no one else's, a mentor to countless people trying to find their voice, and a friend. As a mentor, Andy was like the antidote to alienation, making many young people like myself feel accepted. He didn't have to put his hand on my shoulder and tell me, "You can do anything you put your mind to." Instead, his approach was to just do anything he put his mind to. He led through action. He showed younger people the awesome things he was always up to, his unstoppable need to be creative nearly every minute that helped mold the person I became and encouraged many others. His work received a fair amount of infamy around the horror movie convention circuits. But what caught...
They both
Thank
do
you,
it, but I
yeah.
think that one's better.
Where was I? Sorry, I never write anything down. This is the first time, and it's a good thing I did. Let me see. He showed younger people the awesome things he was always up to, his unstoppable need to be creating nearly every minute that helped mold the person I became and encouraged many others. His work received a fair amount of infamy around the horror movie convention circuits, but what caught people most off guard was his warm nature. A man that made the film The Mutilation Man was kind, affable, and couldn't wait to share his opinions about movies, books, and life with others. I spent weeks thinking about what Andy really taught me because he basically invented my entire career. I could easily go on and on about the things he showed me about editing or camera placement or any number of technical aspects, but you can pick that up from anyone. What I really learned from Andy was what passion looks like and what having drive truly means. Andy didn't have a passing interest in making films. He didn't hope to get a job on sets because it would be working at a car dealership. He had a desire inside to create film because he couldn't see an existence where he didn't do it. He had the compulsive need to create films no matter what, even when he felt hindered or depressed or overwhelmed by daily life. The constant in Andy Copp's life from start to finish was film. I've had the most terrible anxiety about writing this piece because I wanted to get across everything I could, and I wanted you to really get an idea of why Andy's work matters so much. I wanted you all to know how much we as creative people have benefited from his unrelenting, brave genius. How what he created was almost as interesting as why he created it. You don't even have to like his work to appreciate it. Andy poured himself onto the screen, created captivating and personal works of varying degrees of quality, and I cannot encourage you enough to seek out his work so that you can have a chance to get to know him just a little bit. I promise it will be worth your time. Thank you.
And thanks for tuning in for another edition of Neon Madness. Woohoo!
First time I saw some of Andy's stuff, I think he was a student at Wright State, and it was a Super 8 movie he had done, and I don't remember the whole movie, but I remember the last shot was a tracking shot from a car, and I think it was probably his house, and you reveal all these bodies along the street.
I think the first thing I saw that Andy directed was Black Sun. I had met Andy, and he's like, oh, I'm showing my film. You're in a bar watching a video, made on video, and you're like, how good is this really gonna be? It kind of knocked me on my seat. It was like something totally unexpected. It wasn't just a guy making films in his garage. It was art, it was poetry. After I saw Black Sun, I'm like, okay, this guy is someone to take seriously. He's really a filmmaker.
It hugely affected me because I was looking at this piece and saying, you know, this is a piece of art that is completely what he wants it to be.
First thing I've ever seen by him was actually The Mutilation Man, because I was doing like backyard films, and then here was a guy doing a low-budget movie, and looking at his effects, I was mesmerized by it.
Mutilation Man will stay with you your entire life.
It's one of those films that's experiential. It washes over you and really allows you to enter the world that Andy created. And that's one of the things I think that's really true about Andy's cinema is you never stood outside of it. You experienced it.
I know Andy had heard about my partner Jim Van Bever, and he knew about our films, Deadbeat at Dawn. He was very interested in working on the Manson family. He helped us out with makeup effects.
I saw some of the movie posters and some of the different pictures he had posted up on his desk. And from that moment on, I knew that I was going to be working with someone very special and very fun. Well, once I got around Andy, he taught me how to kind of relax and realize that it's okay to be myself. You know, that I could come out of my shell a little bit.
I came to know Andy at the Miami Valley Cable Council. I was a volunteer at 12 years old. I was really, really young and awkward and unsure. And Andy, you know, looked at me and saw just a world of potential.
I met Andy late 2000, 2001. My brother was taking classes with him at Sinclair. I first seen him actually on New Shock Theater as Reverend Zealot. Was my first actual knowing who Andy was, and then we also bought Neon Madness, the magazine, when it was a fanzine.
I came to know Andy because I was a student at Wright State University. We were doing documentaries. I did an audio piece on Dr. Creep, and as part of that I talked to Rick Martin and Andy Copp. He told me about Horrorama and how it was a big fundraiser for charity for kids, so I went to that, and I was really impressed by everyone who turned out.
He was a guy who was always very supportive and really helpful, but at the same time kind of no BS. You know, he kind of called things the way he saw them, but it was always in kind of a very sort of supporting manner.
Well, we could talk badly about our guests and aren't answering their phones, but I won't do that because I love those guys.
Yeah.
Knowing Andy really affected my life in a positive way. Learning from him, I learned more than I did when I did go to film school.
He was one of these no-budget people who just kind of did things on his own. He didn't want to be part of a clique or a group or suck up to somebody else's vision of how he should make films.
He was really patient and kind, and as a friend, he was just amazing, and he played a very important part of my life. I feel like Andy, he had friends that he was close to, but I felt like he was a friend to way many more people than he even knew.
Andy told me I could make movies. Andy told me I could go out and do it. There were other people who'd said that, but Andy was living that, and he was an incredible role model, without a shadow of a doubt. I owe my entire creative life to Andy.
Andy taught me the value of staying true to your vision and letting it play out the way it needs to play out. Especially going through a university film program, you're sort of taught these rules. Andy was a guy who was operating out on his own and breaking the rules. In that sense, Andy was really kind of, you know, the true independent filmmaker.
Realize Santa's black.
Yeah, well, I thought you knew that.
No,
Okay.
I was misled all these years.
Right, yeah, that's because you're white.
I really didn't get to know Andy's work in cable access until I saw an episode of Pirate TV that was devoted to Black History Month. And I think I got an appreciation for some of his work right there. In growing up in the 80s, the same as Andy, co-producing video 80s hot tracks was also a lot of fun. People would stop us on the street and go, hey, I watch your show. I really like your show, 80s Hot Tracks. And, you know, it kind of pushed us to a celebrity status. I got to see a different side of him. Maybe Andy was kind of coming out of his shell a little bit with this program.
I don't think a lot of people even realize how many shows the man was involved in. You had the New Shock Theater and bringing Dr. Creep back to television. You had Loops, which was a trailer show, Pirate TV, Psychotic Feed, Neon Madness, opening night theater. I mean, he pretty much did everything that you could think of.
Working on Andy's sets was never normal.
One of the best sets that I worked on for him was Black Sun, and he had us go out into the middle of this playground. It was an elementary playground. We had guns, we had fake blood and condoms filled with fake blood, and like he's telling Chris Workman to throw these condoms filled with blood at one of the actors, and it was literally us standing there for about 20 minutes as this condom was being winged at this guy over and over. And by the time it's over, this guy has welts all over his chest. And Andy's whole thing the whole time was, you gotta throw it harder.
I was the director of photography on his last film, Church of the Eyes, and I filmed him naked. I had to work with animal body parts. He had locations that were overrun with hornets. I was dressed as Jesus and leading a woman around in a leather choker. As a director of photography for Andy on one of his films, we clashed all the time. We'd be filming a tree that had strings tied to it that were holding tongues and forks and knives, and I had no idea what that meant. And Andy would try to explain it, and I would say, Andy, just give up and hand me a shot list. Joe Dorowski's DP had no clue what he was doing, so we'll be fine. I'll probably never experience anything like working for Andy. He had more of a vision than anyone I've ever known.
Both times I was on set with him, he was not only directing, he was also in the film.
We worked with him a little bit on Quiet Nights of Blood and Pain.
He asked us to help out with some special effects makeup for Quiet Nights of Blood and Pain. He's like, well, I'm gonna have it all put together. I just need your help like getting it on, because it was burn makeup for his face. And he had cast everything and it was ready to go. We just had to help apply it and get it painted so he could then do the scene.
We spent about 2 hours putting this makeup, applying this makeup on. He's like, we gotta go shoot. And here he is driving around Dayton with this burn makeup on one side of his face, going to the location so we can do this shoot. It was just like, this is how my day always goes.
And then working on True Nature, it was kind of cool. He worked on it, he helped us out. It was Andy's 36th birthday. He spent with us.
We were shooting at night, fortunately, so it worked out. He's like, I'm gonna go have dinner with my mom and then I'll be over there. And we're like, are you sure about this? And he's like, yep, I'm in.
In the film, there's a scene of a drain backing up in a basement, and that was actually Andy underneath a prop of a fake drain, pushing sewagey kind of murky, nasty water up through it with sort of a device, like a plunger kind of thing.
He climbs under the table to operate the apparatus to get all that nastiness up.
He went for, I don't even know, 10 takes. He would just keep doing it till it looked right. And we're like, dude, it's your birthday. Go home. What are you doing here with us? And he's like, no, this is what I do. I love this.
He was such a big spirit and such a loving spirit that's, just being involved in that kind of stuff and helping friends make their art was, as far as he was concerned, it's all he ever needed to do.
Check it out. That's your Reverend Zealot peacing out on this one, guys.
I don't think at times he felt that his work was being appreciated enough when really it was.
I think what he left behind is a legacy of film, a legacy of good friendship, and a legacy of a really decent man.
I think Andy's left behind a legacy that a lot of no-budget, micro-budget filmmakers can really look up to, as far as being uncompromising and following your vision of what you want to do.
He helped so many people learn how to be media makers and tell their stories.
I think he left behind many people like me who he made a humongous difference for. He left behind a fan base that that's going to miss him and his work forever.
I think Andy left behind inspiration. That's the thing that people will look at when they look at his art and go, my God, I can't believe this guy in Dayton, Ohio was creating the type of intense, kind of in-your-face, painful kinds of experiences that I can somehow relate to.
And now I'd like to welcome Andy's family up to the stage to accept the Filmmaker Award on his behalf.
Henrik, you worried about writing what you had to write, and I'm only going to try to get through 3 sentences. That was just beautiful. I don't know what else that we can say other than we're just honored to accept this award for Andy. And we're very proud of Andy, not only for his work as a unique artist, but also how he lived his life with such passion and such purpose. He was truly an exceptional person and loved by so many, and we miss him, and we know you do too. Thank you.
The second award tonight is the Key Award, and this award is for special service to the filmmaking community. This year, the Key Award goes to the Levin Family Foundation for their work supporting and promoting service to the filmmaking community. And I'm going to invite up Ron Rollins, who's the president of FilmDayton, to present the award.
I always write things out. Greetings, it's so nice to see everyone here tonight. Many people in town are probably familiar with the Levin Family Foundation and its wide range of philanthropic works. A lot of people may not know, however, exactly how much the film world has been a part of the work that the Family Foundation does and is known for. We'd like to recognize that work tonight. The Foundation's basic mission, as you'll know if you go to their website, is to find problems and areas of need in Montgomery County and to fund solutions and to fund the organizations that are trying to find solutions to those problems. They focus largely on the homeless, the hungry, people who are medically underserved, and women and children at risk. The Foundation is also a generous funder of the arts in our community, and also of Jewish causes and community services. Groups in the area that have received benefit of their generous donations range from Sixa to Beth Abraham Synagogue. It's a very long list. The foundation was founded decades ago by Dayton entrepreneur and businessman Sam Levin. And today it's managed by descendants and family members who compose a board of 6. Karen Levin, the executive director, Al Levin, Lou Levin, Peter Wells, Howard D. Michaels, and the youngest generation, Ryan Levin, who has recently joined FilmDayton's advisory council. Thank you, Ryan. As you'll see in a moment in the tribute video that we'll have on screen in a moment, in addition to good works, movies have always been deeply encoded into the Levin family DNA. Among Sam's many businesses was ownership and development of a chain of movie theaters, indoor theaters and drive-ins that dotted the Cincinnati and Dayton area, including many of the many iconic names that we still remember in Dayton today, such as the Sherwood Twin Drive-In and the Kon-Tiki. The family still owns the Dixie Drive-In. In 1964, Sam even made a movie of his own, Girls on the Beach, a sort of a beach blanket romp with the Beach Boys and Leslie Gore that you can still see occasionally on AMC. The family's most recent foray into film is what we're recognizing primarily tonight, and that is its support of the documentary Take Us Home. The film by Yellow Springs filmmaker Eileen LeBlanc, whose first documentary, Dayton Codebreakers, was shown at our first FilmDayton Festival. Take Us Home is an extraordinary look at the plight of the Jews of Ethiopia, an oppressed minority who have been repatriated in large numbers over several decades to a new life in Israel. Several years ago, the Levin family was contacted by groups in Israel to see if they might support the effort. When she looked into it further, Karen Levin realized that a documentary film had to be made to tell this extraordinary story. It's a story that involved suffering, hope, and massive relocation of thousands of people, but which most of the world did not know anything about. Working closely with LeBlanc and her local film crew on the film during numerous trips to Ethiopia and Israel, Karen became the film's guiding light. And while the foundation itself generously underwrote what became a very large, complex, multi-year project as it was completed. As Karen told me the other day, it's one of the things I'm most proud of. Telling a piece of history that most people don't know, and Eileen's determination to finish the project was a good example of how Film Dayton, funders, and filmmakers alike can all work together in a productive way. Indeed, it takes a village to make a film. Take Us Home has been a big hit on the international and national film festival circuit. Its most recent inclusion has been to the Hollywood Black Film Festival in the coming weeks. We should cue the video.
Hi, I'm Ryan Levin with the Levin Family Foundation, and I'm here with my family and co-trustees, my Uncle Alan, my mother Karen, and my father Louis. And here in the next 180 seconds, I'm going to give a 70-year history of my family's involvement in film. Some of you may remember some of the good names, the old Kon-Tiki, the Captain Kidd, the Sherwood Twin, the Dixie Drive-In, and it's noteworthy to say that the Dixie Drive-In Theater is still alive, around, and showing 4 great movies each evening. My father and my uncle and my mother raised me in an environment around films. He always saw the movie posters, heard about what was playing, what was coming. Most importantly, took me to the theaters at night, where I got to enjoy the sights, the sounds, the spectacle of the movie theater, and see how the sausage was made, as it were, behind the scenes, to see the film whirling about upon reels and through the projectors and back to catch-up reels. And it was a great movie lifetime experience growing up in that kind of environment. Most kids wouldn't get that experience, and I really enjoyed it. And that is why I think my family inspired me to continue the legacy, to keep the torch alive with our last drive-in theater, our last theater at all, the Dixie Drive-In Theater. And in addition to that, my family has inspired me with our support of the Take Us Home video.
It all started in 1946 when we built the Sherwood Drive-In Theater. Later on it became the Sherwood Twin, and from there we built or bought theaters in Springfield, Ohio, and in Columbus, Chicago, and also Cincinnati. We developed 17 theaters. The thing that inspired Sam to do this movie was the fact that pictures like that were doing gangbusters business, and we thought, why not make a movie and make a lot of money off of it.
The background of the story was involved around the Beatles, and that was his idea. He wrote the play, wrote the film, and Sam, as you might expect, was a very smart guy. I was lucky enough to be a judge in the beauty contest that was in the film, and that wasn't too hard to take.
Well, Sam was a judge too.
That's right. Sam was a judge too, and so it was a fun 8 days. Lou keeps telling me that I started it, but I keep saying that he started it. I think I'm more accurate.
I called up all the vendors to get it started, but it was your idea to start the operation. The Pittsburgh operator told us that he was filling up his entire theater with flea market vendors on a Sunday, and that's what inspired us to get started ourselves, and eventually all of our drive-in theaters had flea markets. After a time, they were more successful than the movies.
Doing the movie Take Us Home was one of the most interesting and gratifying experiences. It's a takeoff of doing due diligence for the foundation because originally that's how the whole thing got started, is by doing due diligence over in Gondar, Ethiopia, for a project we were going to fund. And when I was there, the different stories I heard and the sites I saw, I wanted to know more, and I came back and tried to, read books and everything, and it was always from the perspective of the people who were white. It was not from the perspective of the Ethiopians who were actually going through this. There's always trade-offs, and even though you go to a place that's a lot better than you were before, there are always those you leave behind. I think it's a movie that's applicable to anyone who has family members who's immigrated, and it also gives you a very interesting perspective about a story that most people don't know anything about concerning the Ethiopian Jews and their immigration into Israel.
All I knew was that there were Ethiopian Jews, and I read everything I could read, but we didn't know what the story was. I tell stories that are based on human beings. They're very personal, and we went over and then we met families, and when we picked out the families that we thought we wanted to follow over a period, we did, and we went back every time something happened in their lives, and that becomes a very expensive documentary, and that's before you begin editing and post-production or any of that. And the Levin Family Foundation, and Karen Levin especially, made it all happen, and it wouldn't happen without them. There's just no way.
That should have said that Peter Wine was the producer and director of that film. FilmDayton would like FilmDayton is very proud to offer our 2013 Key Award to the Levin Family Foundation.
On behalf of the Levin Family Foundation and the late Sam Levin, I would like to thank FilmDayton for honoring us with the Key Award. FilmDayton was of invaluable service in helping Take Us Home a success. I would like to thank the following individuals: Eileen LeBlanc, the producer and director, for having the intestinal fortitude, and I do mean intestinal fortitude, and vision to finish this amazing documentary. Mike King for his incomparable cinematography. Orly Malasa, who, by the way, came to Israel from Ethiopia during Operation Moses in 1984, for her assistance with the Olim in Ethiopia and in Israel. All of our sound technicians in the US and Israel, Carrie O'Reilly for her skill as a line producer, Jim Klein for his outstanding expertise in editing, Michael and Sandy Bashaw, who composed and played the hauntingly beautiful soundtrack, Micha Feldman, Asher Naim, and the Jewish Agency for Israel, who ran interference for us in Israel and Ethiopia, Ron Rollins, Gloria Skursky, Sam Warwar, Steve Bogner, and Julia Reichert for their advice and assistance. All of our fellow donors who contributed funding to this project, all of the individuals who consented to be in the documentary, and above all, the Ethiopian immigrants who granted unlimited access to the most personal and heart-rendering moments of their lives.
That's a tough act of all. She covered all. I just wanted to say simply that Peter Wine did a fantastic job on that video. I was so impressed with the way he did that. Really nice. Good job, Peter. I know he's an incredible videographer. And I just want to say I was not as aware of Andy Copp, but I was aware of, I was a big fan of Dr. Creep. He did one of my birthdays when I was a kid, and I noticed that he was back on the air. And obviously it was due to Andy. And I'm going to see Mutilation Man for sure. It's on my list. So, but last parting thought was support your local drive-in theater, please. We'd love to see us at Dixie Drive-In Theater. Of course, right now, vote online, and we might get a digital projector. So food for thought. But thank you so much, Film Dayton, Ron Rollins, Megan, and everybody out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, our last award this evening is the Innovation Award, and that is for career achievement in innovative filmmaking. This award is also given in memoriam this year to Judd Yalkut. Dr. Ben Britton, professor of art at the University of Cincinnati and longtime friend of Judd's, will be presenting the award.
Well, I've also got my stuff in writing. You know, it's, I think, a lot more important when you're standing in for someone who you respect for so much. So I'm pretty darn nervous, but well, I'll just help you explain, you know, why I have respected Judd so much. So here, I'm here to explain the award, unfortunately posthumously, for Judd Yalkut, who is a video artist and a filmmaker, who lived for many years in Dayton, and he worked as an artist, a curator, a critic, a consultant, and a mentor to many artists in Ohio and around the world. Judd was born in Brooklyn. He was a Brooklyn boy. He's very proud of it, and he carried his accent and his sort of New York City flair with him wherever he went around the country and wherever around the world. He sort of took New York spirit with him. When he grew up in New York, he was immersed in the art world there, and he took up filmmaking as a young man. He participated in the experimental film revolution that really you know, shook New York in the 60s and the world therefrom. He collaborated with dancers and musicians, performance artists, poets, painters, artists of every kind. And although he was using film and video, it wasn't anything like television, and it wasn't anything like Hollywood. It was art, and he was using those tools in a completely original way. He and his friends experimented and did amazing things together. So he was a member of USCO, which was a sort of a film performance gang, an experimental media art performance group, and he was a member of Fluxus, which I don't know if you can really be a member of, or you could say you're a member of Fluxus. It's sort of an international art gang descended from Dadaism and Surrealism and Marcel Duchamp and Jean Tingley. And he was a close friend of Nam June Paik, Charlotte Moorman, Yoko Ono, Woody Steiner Vasolka, Taka Imura, all of these big name people in the world of video art. He was in the middle of all of that, pulling people together, introducing folks and helping them find apartments and ways to make their art. They embraced video as a tool of artists in ways that had never before been even thought of. And Judd helped the other people around him because he had a background in film, and he was always curious about technology. He helped people understand and use the video in the film. He made experimental artworks of his own, and he showed them at places like Millennium Film Archive and The Kitchen. He collaborated with Nam June Paik to make Global Groove, which was maybe the seminal, groundbreaking video art piece that sort of exploded the minds of all of America when it was shown on PBS around the country. He very, sort of in his very quiet way, he conversed with people, he critiqued, and he collaborated with a multitude of artists who really changed the world with media and redefined media in American culture in the 60s. and he was a pillar of the community in the New York art scene. He came to Ohio to teach and to share his love of filmmaking and of art with the people of this region. And here he found the abundance of nature, so different from New York City, the beauty of the natural world, and he worked to build and develop the community of artists in Ohio while maintaining his ties to his friends around the world. It's fascinating when you see the scope of his work to see how things, some things continued from his New York time and to the time that he came to Ohio. I was fascinated with light and nature and people. And yet the works that he did were interestingly different when he came here. So periodically he would shoot video around here, around the country on his trips, and he'd pack up his video tapes into bags and take them back to New York, upstate, to a place called the Experimental Television Center, where there was all of these bizarre robotic machines that were invented by other friends of his, and he would colorize the video, strobe it, warp it, blend it together, and in ways that nobody had ever done before. And he made experimental video artworks and showed them all over the world, opening people's minds to video as an art form and television as an art form, humanizing technology. His experiments reflected his spiritual quests and his spiritual state. Judd believed in angels and the supernatural presence of the divine. And in his art, he offered viewers access to that experience and an appreciation of that reality, the reality that he knew. And as he continued his work through the years, making video collages, sculptures, installations, and artworks of all kinds, his capacity to transport a prepared audience to an experience of the sublime became perfected. His later works are masterpieces. They always, regardless of what technology, he knew film, he knew video so well that he was able to create things that used the essential qualities of the medium in ways that, a fabulous painter is able to, push daubs on the surface of a canvas, so could he push pixels. A few years ago, Judd was able to return to New York City once again to mount a major retrospective of his work at the Whitney Museum of American Art. It was a huge show, beautifully produced, and the opening was attended by his artist friends from around the world. I don't want to say too much about his work, but unfortunately, recently, we probably had not expected that this would be a posthumous award, but that's where we are. But it's important to know that he's left a legacy of love for art, respect for artists, and appreciation for how new media art blends our beings together in a mutual awareness of life, of our lives together. And I consider him the greatest collaborator. So thank you, Judd.
Judd and I would talk about surrealist artists and German philosophers and cosmology and physics and film theories. We talked about film, but it wasn't the only thing. It was only a part of it. I think that's one of the things I think Judd wanted to make an impression upon you as a viewer. And it's not to look at film as the only way to experience life and art. That art is also collages and paintings and sculpture and music and performance art and other ways of looking at the world besides the ones that you get comfortable with. And that's what I think Judd taught.
Sit down, please, Sean. Ladies. Ladies and gentlemen, since this is my...
When I think of Judd, I think of two things. I think of his film and a career and the wonderful things he did there, and also of his role as an advocate for Dayton, for local artists in Dayton.
Judd was a very, very unique character, very creative. He was like the real hippie from New York City. He was the big artists that came to Dayton to work with all these young kids.
He started teaching film at Wright State in 1973, and there we learned how to use really old school technology to create images. Something like an optical printer, which was a projector and camera, aimed at each other to photograph film frames and then manipulate them, increase the contrast, or create slow motion effects or freeze frames.
By 1965, I was involved in multimedia shows with the USCO group involving film combined with slides and electronics and many other things. And it was that time that I started filming the pieces by Nam June Paik, which were television pieces that did not exist on videotape, and I would turn it into film material, and that began our collaboration. So at that point on, film and video really progressed simultaneously for me as two things, although I didn't start working in video myself until 1968, when the first video portable equipment was available.
Another thing that Judd did, I think, that was important for the Dayton area was he started a film studies program outside the university, a media studies group. And it was there that he would screen experimental films, bring in experimental filmmakers such as Richard Myers from Kent State and Janice Crystal Lifson from Antioch College, and show video and films projects that these filmmakers had made.
I always felt that working in both media was a way of, like, as I used to put it, polishing each medium by rubbing them against each other so that they polished themselves into their essential essence.
He told me that his father was a dentist, and he lived in like a row house. And one side was the house and the other side was the dentist's office. And he used to play piano, classical piano, which most people didn't know. And he would play the piano while his father was working on people in the dentist's office.
I went to New York for the first time in the mid-60s. I recall seeing what we called underground films at that time. In fact, they were experimental films by artists. Film hadn't really been recognized as a fine art medium at that point. And Judd was working in that field at that time, and he was doing things on film and with film that just weren't being done.
I like to build imagery so that there's a kind of a flow that happens. Dynamic tranquility is a term which I discovered, for example, like watching a sunset over the Pacific Ocean when I was living in Big Sur, and being aware of how calm it was, but how things were happening every second, the changes in color, in the air, and things, living things. It was something, there was an energy that was constantly dynamic and changing, and yet the whole thing was a very, very kind of peaceful and meditative thing. And so I thought of dynamic tranquility to capture that. And that's a quality that I like to bring to a number of the things that I do in my media work.
He had projected images on the parachute that was inflated with fans. And I thought, well, that's weird. It's a very strange way of looking at film, but it was another way of expanding the concept of cinema beyond just the theater screen, and showing how film and video and other visual technologies could operate with the real world.
But he continued not only to do work, but he continued to be an advocate for the arts in Dayton. And he and Peg, even after they moved to Waynesville, they would come to Dayton regularly for anything that was happening in the arts. And that was just, to me, amazing and very wonderful. It showed what an advocate he was.
To see new colors, to see new aspects of how things evolve in the world, and also relate better to the natural world in such a way that it becomes a harmonious experience rather than a disharmonious and destructive experience, which is what we are faced with in a good deal of contemporary life. So it's an enhancement of all of these positive aspects of what exists in creation. And it's a spiritual process which is becoming deeper and more important for me as my media work continues in both installation and single channel pieces.
I guess I knew him for about maybe 35 years, and didn't get to see him a lot, but whenever I did see him, it was always a nice chat for a few moments, and he was just very, very special. Super creative man, and I feel very lucky to have met him because I think he touched a lot of people.
Judd was a wonderful person, a wonderful asset to our community, to the arts community, and he will be very much missed.
Human beings cannot live without vision. Vision transforms reality. As a teacher, I would like to open people up to the reality that surrounds them. The world is glorious, and the ability to have visions and communicate it is a divinity within man. Life is a constant process of discovery, of learning to use our perceptual apparatus. By using your perceptual apparatus, boredom is impossible. Judd Yalkut.
Judd's family was unable to be here tonight, but our thoughts and prayers are with his family during this time, and Film Dayton will accept the award on behalf of his family. So thank you all for coming tonight and showing your support for the filmmakers that make our region so special. I want to invite everyone to a reception that we're having right after the ceremony. It's at the Crown Plaza at View 162 on the top floor. So everyone is invited to that, and please join us. Thanks.